Hey Mum,
Yes.
do you remember what you said in last episode?
What did I say? We're going to join the whole top section of the quilt together.
Oh, yeah. That was before I saw your applique block.
Hey! Welcome back to Pattern Poole TV. This is episode 8 of Island Home. In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to trim your applique block and how to join it to the star block using the 1 to 3 method of quilt-as-you-go. If you are following along with us and making the Island Home quilt, go ahead and make your applique block in the same way as previous applique blocks. This applique block features a mirror image design based on the native Banksia and 2 welcome swallows. It contains over 40 pieces, and that is the reason why in this tutorial we are
Going to join the whole top section of the quilt together.
So let's get started.
Isn't it exciting how this quilt is starting to come together? So this is part 8. It's a beautiful applique block designed by Alaura, and it's made in exactly the same way as all of the other applique blocks are made. So you've got your full-size pattern sheets and instructions in the course notes. But what we're going to do today is, if you've been wondering how we're going to make all of this fit together, I'm going to show you how we are going to measure and trim our applique block so that it fits this section here. Just before we start measuring, it's easier to work out our measurements less the seam allowance. So all of these pieces here are going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So a 1/4 inch on that side and a 1/4 inch on that side equals 1/2 inch. So let's measure this section first. This section measures 32.5 inches. So 32.5 minus 1/2 is 32 inches. Now let's measure our star block. Now my star block, I already know, measures 15.5 inches square. So I'm going to take off my seam allowance, so that's 15 inches. Now take 15 inches away from 32 inches, and that's going to leave you with a difference of 17 inches. So this piece here needs to be 17 inches wide to fit the width of this section, and then it needs to be 15 inches high to fit the height of our star. So we're going to trim 15.5 inches by 17.5 inches, and that includes our seam allowance. Now don't stress if your pieces are a different size to mine, because just use that same formula, it's in the course notes, and it will just mean that if this star block was a little bit smaller, this block here is going to be a little bit bigger just to compensate, and that's the beauty of applique blocks. Also, if your height is going to be a little bit shorter than mine, that's fine too, because when we do this section here, we're going to make this the same height as this section, so everything's going to fit together. So first of all, to trim your applique blocks, you need to find your centers. Now when we do applique, we always start with our centers anyway. We fold it in half both ways to get a center crease. So in the instructions, I just said make a mark on those center creases just on the outer edges. Now, what we're going to do is 17.5 inches is the width of our block that we want. So half of 17.5 is 8 3/4. So I'm just going to, across the top here, make a mark that is 8 3/4 from my center mark. I'll do that at the top edge, and then I'll also do that at the bottom edge. And then all I have to do is connect those marks. So now I have a straight edge. I can now position the 17.5 inch mark on my ruler, on my marked line, measure on this side, and do the same thing at the bottom edge too. Then all I need to do now is just connect those marks to make my second straight edge. So now I have 17.5 inches this way. I'm going to rotate the block and measure 15.5 inches this way, just using the same process. So step 1, find half of 15.5, mark that, which is 7 3/4 inches from the center out. Do the same thing on the other side. Draw the line. And then measure 15.5 inches from my line. All the time making sure that lines are nice and square. So that's how you measure up your block. You always start from the center and work out, and that way you know that your design is going to be nice and centered and even. Now to trim. Trim away the top, the bottom, and the side edge that's not connecting to the star block. That can all be just trimmed on the marked line, so we're trimming away the batting and the backing. And then the edge that does connect to the star block, you only want to trim the top layer on the marked line. So pop your ruler underneath and just cut on the marked line. The ruler protects your batting and backing. Now we need the extra backing fabric so that we can fold it over and either hand stitch it or machine stitch it on the back. Now the next step is to trim away the excess batting and backing on the edge of our block that will connect to the star block, and we're just trimming it so that it's going to be 1/4 inch away from our top fabric. Once you've done that, you can then trim all the way around the edge of your star block, trimming level with the top fabric. So we're now ready to join these two pieces together with the 1 to 3 method. And if you want to see more detailed tutorials on this method, we have another 2 videos, and I'll put those links in the description for you.
The first step is to place the blocks right sides together. Separate the batting and backing so that you can pin the top layer only to all 3 layers of the underneath. Now sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like that. Open out and press the seam towards the applique block. Flip your work over to the wrong side and trim the batting so that it butts up against the seam. So to do this, use your ruler and just push that up against the seam so that you can feel the bulk of the seam. Mark a line. Cut on the marked line and slip your ruler underneath just to protect the underneath layers. Your batting should now be neatly butting up against the seam allowance. Sometimes I use batting joining tape, but it's not necessary this time because we're going to do some extra quilting which will hold the batting in place. So now you can either fold your backing fabric under just so that it meets the stitching line, and you can hand sew that. But if you prefer to machine sew, mark a line that is 3/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. And then press over on that line. So if you're wondering, I've just used an iron-off friction pen just to mark that line, just so that it's visible and you can easily see it in the video. I think I've mentioned before, some people like these pens, some people don't. I thought on the backing fabric, that'll be fine. So use your glue to hold this seam in place temporarily. That should now be covering the stitching line by about 1/8 of an inch. So flip to the front and pin in the ditch. Flip to the wrong side. Check that the pins are just catching in the folded edge of the fabric. And if everything's okay, you can now stitch in the ditch.
But that's it. That's how you trim your block and how you join it together with the 1 to 3 method. And I'm just going to finish off by adding a couple of extra quilting lines, just in the same way that I did with our previous blocks. And I'm going to leave it there because I will add more quilting lines when I join that section onto another section. So just like that. Now you can see these two sections are now the same size, so just set them aside and they'll be joined together in a future episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.